morning, everybody. Welcome to the board of NHS Direct, NHS Trust. It's very nice to see everybody today. We have a board meeting which will be mostly in public. We then have a second private part of the board meeting which is mostly devoted to the consideration of our conversion programme. I want to say, as usual at the beginning of the meeting, that we're live on the web, so welcome to anybody who's listening to us online. We'll do our best to make it a good experience for people who are listening remotely, but of course it's a working meeting, not a performance, so it won't be perfection. There are a few apologies for absence today, partly I think because of the bank holiday sequence that we're going through. So the people who aren't here are Trevor Smith, the Finance Director, who's going to be ably represented by Jackie Dunn. Welcome to the board, Jackie. Trevor Jones, our Vice Chairman, who's not here today, and Brian Gaffney, our Medical Director, who is going to be dialing in from Northern Ireland later on in the agenda. The other thing I wanted to say at the beginning of the meeting is that this is Catherine Meaden's last meeting here as our Comms Director. She has a long title, but effectively she's been leading on our comms effort for 4 years now? Nearly three. And she's, I mean, as you know, Catherine herself is a brilliant communicator, and she's been a fantastic person to have in leading that function and also around the organisation, around the office. We're going to miss her very much, and it's true to her character, I think, that she's going off for further adventures, and we wish her well with those. I haven't had any declarations of interest against this agenda. If anybody wants to make any now, that's fine. If not, later on in the agenda is fine. Let's then move on to minutes of the meeting, the last meeting, which was held on the 21st of March. Can I first then ask for any matters of accuracy on the last set of minutes? Ruth.
15.3, it should be the NHS Confederation, not Federation.
Well spotted there. Okay, so that's a...
Probably should change their name to that, actually. Been there before, I think.
All right. Before we stray into any sensitive territory, encouraging other organisations to change their names, we'll move on. Any other matters of accuracy? Sue?
It was a question, really, whether it was accurate. I'm not sure. 9.1.
You're testing us here.
The trust seal on the property down in Exeter was signed by Nottinghamshire County Council.
Correct.
Is that right?
It is correct.
No, that's fine. I just thought
I did a double take when I signed the lease, but I'm assured that it is with that authority because it's part of an investment portfolio that they have, which extends beyond the boundaries of Nottinghamshire.
Thank you.
Fantastic. Okay. Well, that was a slightly surprising query and surprising answer. Okay. Are there any action points from the minutes that aren't going to be picked up, Nick, in the action list, which is our second?
I think all the actions are on the action list. All of them are either on the agenda and will come up at a later stage, and a couple of them are simply to be noted relating to board recordings. A small sample for the first 12 years board recordings, call recordings, will be a small selection from the first 12 years of NHS Direct, so calls will be retained on CD, but not sufficient for research purposes, which would be a much larger and not cost-effective arrangement. So this is simply so that we have exemplars of different types of calls.
Okay.
For the historical record. So that was, Brian was asked to report on that, and in Brian's absence, just highlight that.
Thank you.
And I think the other one was Tricia just noting the data about call lengths and comparative dispositions for call recordings.
Okay, and that's been actioned effectively. Yeah, thanks, Trish. That's great. Okay.
Everything else comes up under the agenda.
Yes. Are we going to say anything about the risk management seminar that was held That's not really on the agenda. I don't know if we want to. Anybody wants to just say anything about it?
Tim was there.
'Cause I wasn't. I asked that question because I wasn't able to attend.
And I was late, unfortunately. I think it was quite useful, and we've not looked at how we do risk management for a bit, actually. So, and it was a very difficult day because I think it was nobody dialed in, as I recall. I think we ought to look.
Trish did.
Sorry, Trish, forgive me.
And Brian. Yeah.
Brian did. Thank you.
So there were about 5 of us in Lehman
Yeah.
Street, including Tim and Trish and Brian on the phone.
I think I found it quite useful, and I think we ought to find a way of condensing that and getting it round to the board members, because I think it's a board issue that we spend an appropriate amount of our attention on risk.
Yeah.
And if we're going to talk about how we do it, then I think it's a board issue. So somehow, Nick, I think we ought
Okay,
to
well,
try
we got the presentation that
summary.
came round as
Yeah.
part of that, which I think that was what, about 8 or 10 slides, rather than
I
ask
think we should
anyone.
circulate that as the first thing and see if we get any responses.
Yeah, okay, that'd be good.
There was quite a good executive presence there, and it was a very good and timely reminder to executives, both of the principles and the processes of risk. They're very helpful for us at this time where we are developing our risk profile for 11-12, so very useful.
Good.
for us.
So obviously the board's going to see the 11-12 risks relatively
Yes.
shortly.
Oh, yes.
And
Yes.
then we'll have a good discussion about those.
Yes.
Good. Okay, that's fantastic. Thank you.
Joanne, sorry,
Yes,
before
Ruth.
we move on, I think the owner is either Helen Assel or Liz Eckert, not Helen Eckert.
Oh,
So just
risk
for,
owner.
Nice one.
Bossy.
Okay.
Just as we're on the subject of board seminars, is this an appropriate point, Joanne, just to highlight the fact that what we've done is to establish a date in in each of the remaining months of the year when we would hold a board seminar. I query whether we want to set aside the date in August. I'll take
Yeah,
the board's
quite
view
right.
on that. So as a no, we don't have a board meeting in August traditionally. So we'll scrub the 17th of August out. But the others are there so that we don't go through the process of trying to fix a date and lots of toing and froing by the Secretariat. Frankly, are pretty much impossible and thankless task to try and get dates.
And also, that last week was a bank holiday week, which is, you can't expect a brilliant attendance, I guess, if it's a
Well,
bank holiday week.
I think what we should do, perhaps, Nick, is extend that, take August out and extend
Extend
that
it through to the end of March.
Yeah, exactly.
So
Exactly, I think that's
we'll add in January, February and March.
Yeah.
And clearly, if we have seminars that we want to slot in, then we'll slot them into those dates. So that, and if we don't, then and we'll make sure that we know the month before what we're doing. So you have at least a month's notice, but at least you know what the dates are for penciling purposes. Yeah.
And let's go back a bit and put on this sheet, which I think is useful, historically what seminars
What
we've
came
had in the
before.
last few months, because
Yeah.
it gives us an overview. We can see how we're spending our time. That's fantastic, thank you.
Okay.
Okay, so if there's nothing else on the action log, I haven't got any engagements to report because I've been away, so we can move straight into the performance section of the agenda with Nick's Chief Executive's report.
Okay. The board assurance framework relating to last year's business plan is there for the board's information. I'm happy to pick up any questions on that. Clearly, we're now going through the process, subject, of course, to the board's approval of the business plan, which is later in the agenda, to construct board assurance framework for 11-12. I'll just pause for any questions on that.
I would just comment how stable it was, actually, because what it's stressing, I just have a quick back, and it's remained consistent over the last 6 months, and also all of the RAG are on this time.
Yeah. I think it is probably a pretty fair reflection of where we've been over the last 6 months.
Stable's a good word.
Yeah. In a non-horse sense. Okay, so I'd move on from that bad pun to National Pandemic Flu Service, and just to say I was very pleased that Renette had the opportunity to pick up the award, which is sitting on the thing behind you. So I might ask Renette to wave it in a minute.
Wave it, wear it.
At the Management Consultants Association Awards, and I think genuinely the National Pandemic Flu Service was held out as a really successful programme, and from what I think, Roger, you said, the applause from the audience was warm and entirely genuine. So.
Yes, one that doesn't get the impression at that award ceremony that all the awards are received with genuine warmth, but I think that one was. Yeah.
So I don't know if there's anything you wanted to add, Renette.
It's 2 years in a row at the MCA Awards, so we've got to do something interesting for next year.
Well done.
Very good. So moving on to other matters, I have signed the East of England 0845 contract for 11/12, and that has been signed equally by the East of England, and I believe we even have a copy. And the terms that are outlined there, which Trevor kindly has just summarised for us, represent no significant change from the briefing that the board had received. So a tough but fair contract settlement for the current year is the way that I would describe it.
We talked about that last time.
Yeah,
Yeah, we did.
just that it's sealed off. I've just paused briefly. I've reported the fact that there's a collective grievance with the RCN about weekend working, and we're going through the formal stages of a stage 3 hearing. Because there's a stage 3 hearing, I don't think that we're in any position to make have any substantive discussion on that. But I will just pause briefly for Joanne to add something.
Yes, I need to let the board know that I have received a petition from the RCN, which we're not able to discuss because of the grievance process going on. It relates to exactly the same issue, and we will report it more fully in the board next time if appropriate.
Okay. Fine. Briefly, Easter, and I think it would be appropriate to ask Renette to give although we haven't got the detailed numbers yet, to give a kind of flavour of Easter, the actual Easter performance. As you will see from my reports, we put in quite a lot of effort before Easter to make sure that national, regional and local stakeholders were informed about the preparations that we'd taken to make Easter work as effectively as possible from an 0845 and service point of view.
No, do you just want to give us a flavour for how we performed over that period for the public?
I think a flavour would be that the Easter, generally for each of the days, that it was as busy but not more busy than we expected as a cumulative across the days. But what we did see was that the periods between 8 o'clock in the morning and midday were in most days much more busier than we had expected. So for example, we had over 2,500 calls in 1 hour, which is what we would normally expect to get over 3. So it was busier. Notwithstanding, our staff did a sterling job, and we didn't have the same issues as we did at Christmas in relation to long callbacks. I myself worked, as I know Trish did and Ruth did, over the weekend, and there was a very good spirit in the call centre. So the experience that our patients received was a much more positive one than they have had at Christmas. it's a credit to all our staff that they put in the time. We've got another weekend coming, so we are not dropping our guard in making sure that we are appropriately resourced to deal with the expected demand over this coming weekend as well.
Thanks, Jeanette. That's great. Steve.
Well, it was just a question. There was a smog alert that was issued actually in at the beginning of the weekend. I just wondered whether that translated itself into more calls with people with respiratory problems.
We received the smog alert calls, and we actually considered sending a message to our staff in a similar vein, and I gave a steer as to not to do that because our patients wouldn't necessarily realise their breathing difficulties were relating to the smog. So I asked the clinical leads just to keep an eye out on whether there was a perceived or an actual increase in calls relating to breathing difficulties. However, yes, our staff were aware of the smog alert, therefore looking out for those calls from our patients.
And do we know at this stage?
No, we're doing a run of the numbers, the algorithms used in relation to breathing difficulties, asthma and cough from today.
Okay, thank you. All right, Tim.
I just ask to what extent our communication, our information got to the public. One of the features on the stakeholder communication plan being communication with the public. Just observing that I didn't notice on the radio or in the press anything about NHS Direct and our plans for Easter.
We had quite a lot of local coverage, which I think is what we expected from our release, which was basically a kind of, Easter's coming up, use the online symptom checkers. It wasn't a sort of strong news story that I would have expected to be picked up. I think had we have got into, interestingly, sometimes with heat wave, we weren't in a heat wave. It was hotter than normal for April, but I don't think it reached the trigger points that classify it as a heat wave. I think had it have done, that's when you start seeing the number and the web address, as much as we can get it across there, on things like national news bulletins, but we didn't reach that level. But there's quite a lot of local coverage, but not national.
All right.
Okay. I wasn't proposing to talk to the other three items, but I'm very happy to answer any questions.
So are there any questions for Nick on any of the other items of his report?
I just thought what a good solution it was to Taunton site closure for everyone.
Yes.
And it reinforced the work that's been done on home working, and I think it should be, sort of the win-win that you would hope from such a situation. So it's well done.
Yeah, I'd like to echo that, Joanne, if I may.
Yeah.
How many staff do we have? Or
Would you ask that question? I'm sure Roger will know the answer, but it's
How many staff do we
8
have?
or 10?
In Taunton, 12.
12, thank you.
But now we have 107 staff who are home workers on a more permanent basis, and then another 100 or so who have laptops for doing excess hours on home workers as well.
Yep, thank you.
Good. Okay. Shall we then move on to the corporate performance package, which Jackie's going to introduce for us today?
Yep. I'll be taking the paper on the board scorecard and the finance report. So during March, there were over 380,000 patient and user contacts. Call volumes were down again in March, around about 5% lower than we were anticipating. But overall for the year, we ended at 4.71 million calls against the contract of 5 million. Access targets in all areas continued to improve during March, which is good. However, we did just marginally fail the time to answer target, 94.9, so only just missed that one. Continued to meet the urgent call target, 95%, but the less urgent were 86% and non-urgent 91%. One of the things I do need to sort of bring to your attention is during the Q4 meeting with East of England last week, we were issued with what they call a contract query letter, raising concerns about our performance during 2011.
During
10/11, so in the last financial year. The Trust has got until the 6th of May to respond to this letter. and the intention is that the executive team will be discussing both the letter and the response at the E&B meeting on the 3rd of May.
The concern is about putting this into context. Our main commissioner felt that although they understood the processes and the challenges that we'd had during the year, and actually are quite clear that we are on an improvement path, they felt it was incumbent upon them to raise their concern about our consistent inability to meet all of our KPIs. So that's their concern, that our performance during the year against KPIs has been too consistently patchy, and they were raising a formal letter of concern. It does not entail any automatic contractual consequences. It's, if you like, the first stage of an escalation process. And they did that, and I will reply formally by the 6th of May.
Just from my point of view, I would, and this is a personal view, I think it's a distraction which we need to concentrate on for now and into the future, and not. I mean, I think lessons learned are important, and I thought we had enough of that conversation to satisfy people. But if such, I mean, obviously you have to respond to a contractual query letter appropriately.
Yeah.
But I just feel that my point would be, if such a letter were going back, that we aim to concentrate on fulfilling our obligations looking forward.
Oh, absolutely.
That's
yes.
all. That's all I wanted to say.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with that. This isn't an intention to go back over, all the details of 10, 11 items that are covered.
It seems to have come out of the blue. That's all.
My own belief is that it was timed prior to Easter. In the event that there were major performances at Easter, the Commissioner would have been able to demonstrate that they'd taken the appropriate contractual path prior to Easter. That's, I think, the important context.
Yeah. Thank you. It was a very helpful steer. Obviously, we have to respond to this in the necessary way, but we're not going to let it distract us from the big challenges coming up. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay.
Shall I just
Jackie,
continue?
yes.
Yeah, so sickness clear continues to be an issue, and that will be covered by Roger's report. In terms of financial performance, pleased to note that the draft accounts were submitted on time to the Department of Health last Thursday. The key factors are we've now got a surplus of 2.7 million, cash balance of 19.9 million, and capital expenditure of 23.6 million. It sounds very, very rosy on the finance front. The audited accounts will be presented to the audit committee on the 13th of June before board approval at the end of the month.
Very good. Well, I think the board would probably like to congratulate you for not just the financial performance but the process. The fact that we've got our accounts well down the line. That's really good to hear. Are there any questions on finance and the performance package?
Just my understanding. Thank you very much. Just my understanding. The fact that that the will not be a clawback of some 2+ million. What happens to that?
That there won't be a clawback of the 2 million.
What happens to that money?
Yeah.
What happens to that money? So that effectively that money sits in our cash balance, right. So it bolsters our cash balance and our sort of surplus, our retained surplus.
Sorry.
We might not want to talk about that at this stage, but return to it at another time.
Okay.
Effectively, the money is available to us.
There is no. There's no carry forward that enables us to spend that money as revenue in the current year.
Yeah.
It's a cash balance is available to support capital investment if we need to.
Okay.
But there is no advantage to us in the immediate financial year we've just gone into.
Thanks, Nick. Sue, then Tim.
It was a question on one of the sickness, the first year attrition figure in the KPIs. I'm a little confused about actually what the KPI is showing. I just wanted to get some clarification on it, because in the report it suggests that it's 23% of all leavers who are first year leavers?
No.
Okay.
It's very clearly
Yeah.
Leavers in the first year of people who started in that year. So it's measuring people who leave in their first year.
Okay, so it would be correct of me to say that within the first year we lose 23%.
A quarter of our staff leave in their first year. That's what we were trying to address in 10-11, so that's what we were measuring in 10-11. We will be measuring something slightly differently in 11-12, but that's what we were addressing in 10-11.
And what will we be addressing in 11-12?
We'll be looking at straight leavers.
Straight leavers, that's fine.
So that's
I think that's
proposal
better.
anyway, and we're discussing those with.
Thank you.
Okay, so that was a clarification on some of the wording, which is a bit ambiguous.
It was, yes. Yeah.
Okay. Tim.
Just coming back to finance, on capital, this is an easy ball over the net for me, I guess, but if it was good expenditure against a really good business case that would really help our patients, then an underspend is not a good thing. If we are profligate as an organisation, then an underspend is a good thing. I don't think we're the latter. And certainly in the Finance Committee, we're going to be looking to getting a better approval process, as people know, to capital, and making sure we spend it. If the business case is sound, we really should spend it so that our patients get a better service. And I know that in that underspend, there are some things that haven't got done. There are some things where we reallocated in a very conscious way. So it's not all bad news. But I think the Finance Committee is a bit concerned that we get closer to the forecast spend. I don't think it's
On capital. Okay. Anything else? Let's move on then. Thank you very much, Jackie. To Roger, your report on sickness absence.
Yes, I'll take this as read and ask for questions, Chair, except to say that what this report amounts to is a review of the activities we've undertaken in 10-11 and some proposals for 11-12, including the reporting regime for this board. So colleagues may want to ask questions or discuss that. Other than that, I'll take it as read.
Thank you. Does anybody have any questions then for Roger on the sickness report and the proposed actions?
Yeah. Not now, Roger, but I think it would be nice to see a sort of timeline of where we've put in initiatives that we're thinking are going to improve the situation, because we've talked about this before, and we've talked about, getting the new supervision structure in place, and that's going to have a good effect.
Yeah.
So there are some lags between cause and effect.
Yes,
but it would be very nice to see. I don't want to look back at history, but when did we do things?
Yeah.
And I'm really looking forward to trying to understand what is the response time for an improvement. And you don't need to do it at the board, but I wouldn't mind seeing it if that would be good. I need to know, when should we be thinking this isn't working?
Yeah.
Yeah? Otherwise it's fine.
Yeah, thank you.
I think that's a good idea.
Yeah,
So
very good.
it's about forcing ourselves to become a bit more specific as to when we expect these things to kick in, which thinking you've probably already done. But
And I think this might be, there is a lot more detail, so I think this might be subject to a board seminar later in the year if the board is interested in that level of detail.
okay. Well, I think that would probably depend, Roger, on how we're performing in
Yes, of course.
this. So
Indeed.
we may well want to have a look at that.
Right, just ask a
Sorry,
question.
Peter. Yeah, Peter then. Tim.
It's something I was going to ask before, just about the top 30. Why is it top 30? Is it just because that's a cut-off line of practicality, or is that right? Because
Yes,
I'm just wondering. I'm just saying to myself, why 30? Why not 40?
It's practicality and time, and particularly this is subject to a fairly detailed meeting between the Divisional Operations Director, the Deputy Director of HR and the Chief Operating Officer, in which they go through each of those top 30 cases line by line, case by case.
So it's a practical.
It's a practical thing. Yeah.
Okay, because if the spotlight is on you, tend to change your habits.
Absolutely.
And therefore,
that is
more spotlight time, the better for more people.
I'm not. I mean, Renette runs the meetings. I'm not sure if
Anyway,
we could handle
it's
a lot more. Could we?
I'm not sure there would be benefit of handling more because there's actually 90 people altogether across the organisation.
Oh, well, it doesn't explain itself.
Right. Yeah. But but actually, what we now do is we do go through person by person specific, but really we're focusing upon how we need to change practice more generally, and whether there are changes to policies, procedures and working practices that we can learn from that would push the benefits out towards a wider group of people.
Good. I'm sure that's the right thing. Thank you. Tim.
Yeah, one of the things I was interested in looking at the report this time was the impact or otherwise of home working, and particularly pertinent with Taunton now moving to home working. Because I think Plymouth was one of our early home working sites, and it's top of the table. And whilst this is probably a statistical quirk in some sense, it would be very reassuring to know that home working does deliver some of the non-sickness or presenteeing benefits that we hope. And well, it doesn't come out of the report.
So there's two things to say about that, Tim. One is it is a statistical quirk. It's a small group of people in Plymouth. But the other important thing, I think, to say, and I could have added it to the point about home working earlier, we are actually going, apart from taking the opportunity where it presents itself, like in Taunton, we're actually going to have a pause in the spread of home working at the moment, develop indicators, and in 6 months' time have a genuine comparison across a whole range of indices between home workers and contact centre workers in order to develop our position for the future on home working. So we're taking the 107 home workers and we are going to spend time now tracking them against similar indices in the contact centre. So that will be there then we will come to a better conclusion.
Excellent. Fine, thank you, Roger. Steve.
I've done 2 engagement visits now, and interestingly on both of them, the nurses commented to me that they did find the job quite stressful, whereas the health advisors didn't say they found the job more stressful. And I was chatting to Renette about this morning, and we just wondered whether, or is there an argument saying the health advisors have worked in call centres before, and therefore they use that environment, whereas the nurses haven't. But my question really is, if this is the case, and I think it also came out of the Good Place to Work survey, is there anything we can do in terms of coaching, counselling to try and understand why people feel this way, and is there anything we can do to mitigate it?
Yeah, I think even more importantly than what you've seen is that it comes comes out very strongly from the 2010 NHS staff survey. So we will be looking very closely at why that is, and determining activity, either changing things or it might be compensatory activity to compensate for the fact that this is a stressful way of working as a nurse. So we haven't come to any conclusions about that, but we are acutely aware of it, particularly following the staff survey.
Thanks, Roger. Okay, shall we? Oh, sorry, Louise, it wasn't clear whether you were.
No. And the other thing that seemed to come out was that I was surprised that they seemed to say that they felt unsupported by staff. In that, the visits that I've been on, it felt very much that people were supported. So I just wondered whether you think that's, sort of inherent sort of problem across the organisation, or whether it's more in some areas than others.
Louise, you're talking about
the NHS. We're talking about the NHS.
The staff survey results. I wonder if we could just hold on to that question, because I think we're going to want to have a good discussion around that later in the agenda when Roger makes a presentation on those results. Thank you. Okay, so I'll just take a note of that. Shall we then move on and Helen, on major projects? Shall we just do that on question basis, or were there any general messages you wanted to give us?
I think mainly that the Delivering Today projects, that they've recently reviewed them all and they've closed off quite a few of them, and also they've got a number of pipeline projects. But all the others are more or less on track. There was one in relation to 111. They're looking at rebaselining the deliverables being undertaken, but apart from that, everything else seems to be on track.
Thank you. Were there any questions about project summary? Summaries, I should say.
That was very useful.
Just by way of context, we're going to have a discussion later on in terms of the conversion programme, and we will see, because I think this approach to being clear about projects and increasingly clear about projects and delivery timescales and benefits and reporting against those is a clear success, actually. Although not every project here has been successful, I think the approach has been right, and will incorporate those projects that haven't been closed off, as Helen says, some have, into the conversion programme. I think the format of reporting and making sure we're reporting against up-to-date baselines, because of course budgets have moved since these projects were first thought of. That if we bring that discipline and just refresh this, it'll come back to the board in a similar format, but I think slightly changed to reflect the conversion programme that we're talking about later.
Okay, that's good. Having seen the conversion programme presentation, Nick, I would echo your point about, I'm thinking about comments that we used to get quite frequently in earlier sort of incarnations of the board, which were worrying about our ability to track projects, to track benefits. I think we have come a long way, and it's good to see that is clearly being embedded in the plans for the conversion programme. So I think that's a very good point. Okay, well then we have one more significant agenda item within the which I'd like to take before we have any sort of break, give you a feel for where we're going, which is in the strategy, the item in the strategy section of the board, which is the 5-year business plan. Now, Ruth, I don't think we're expecting to have a very significant debate about this, because really what this document encapsulates is a direction of travel and decisions that have been thoroughly looked at by the board. And so I'm hoping that we won't, so there are two things I'm hoping we won't end up finding ourselves doing. One is redrafting the wording by committee, always a disaster. The other thing I'm hoping we're not going to find is any fundamental queries about the substance of the business plan. So with that as a frame in which we're having a discussion, let me ask Ruth to introduce our 5-year business plan.
So you stole the words right out of my mouth, Joanne, as I was going to say the same thing. So what you have in your pack is the final draft business plan. As Joanne says, it's gone through a number of iterations, so we're not expecting drafting comments at this stage. Essentially what we did was took the outputs of the board strategy days and created the story around the reflections which you have all received. So what we're really looking for is your confirmation that it does reflect the agreements reached at the board strategy days in terms of mainly the service lines that we will focus on for the next 5 years. Alongside this draft business plan, work is continuing on the detailed integrated business plan, which obviously is necessary for our foundation trust application, and that should be available to board members in May. And also included with the business plan is the draft board scorecard, which will replace the previous version for 10-11 and will be monitored month by month by the board. In addition, we are developing the risk register and board assurance framework, which supports the business plan, as well as the research and development plan and supporting business cases. So those will come to the EMB next Tuesday for consideration, and then where appropriate we'll go to the Finance and Investment Committee for approval. So that's all I wanted to say, really. Happy to take comments.
Fine, okay, I can see people lining up to give comments. Sue, then Steve.
I actually thought this was excellent. I think it's come a huge way from where we used to try and produce plans, and I think it holds together really well. Just two comments. There's one section where we talk about NHS 111 and benefits of NHS Direct and its table, and I really think that needs a lot more work about how we express our competitive advantage in winning NHS 111 contracts, because I read that and it's page 29. I read that and it just feels like a list of things, and for me, if we can get that right, if we can actually express very succinctly what our competitive advantage is, what we bring to the table when we're going out to negotiate and try and win these contracts, and that box doesn't really capture the essence of what we are about, I think. So if we were to do anything extra, I think trying to deal with that table would be good. It also actually applies to the long-term conditions one as well, on the following page. I think both of those could really do with some refining.
Okay, I'm going to collect some comments, and then Ruth ask you to respond. Steve.
Well, first of all, I'd like to agree with what's been said. I thought it was a really good read, actually, and I really felt it encapsulated the discussions that we had at the away days. So I read this, and there was nothing. Everything I think that we commented on is in here, with one exception that Sue's comments on. I've written that as well. Compete. We're going to have to compete. So it sort of feels as if that would be very good. But a very picky thing. When I went to Nottingham's site, there's a health information hub there, and they asked some questions about what their future might be. There's nothing about health information here. If there is, and I've missed it, in which case I apologise.
Okay.
Page 9.
Okay. Thank you, Steve. I'm going to add that to the list. Was there anything else? No. Okay. Louisa.
I wanted to also say what a good read it was, and how it had a sort of good sort of narrative through it. I just had two things. One is that a bit like sort of other things, but I think we are surprisingly sort of modest and understated, and I'd done the same thing. I had rewritten that box. I'd sat there and thought, what are the benefits of NHS Direct, and written some things down, and none of them appeared when I looked. And I was surprised by that. I think it's absolutely essential that we have to say how great we are, and we should really do that. And then just, it's a small point, but in many ways it's written to be accessible for everybody, but just in a few places there are some things that aren't accessible. And I think it would be a shame not to just address those few little things to make it very accessible. I think the other thing I would say, again, trying not to do the writing by ST by committee, is the KPIs. I think whenever we talk about, if I was reading this and I saw there were 7 million penalties with KPIs, I would think, my goodness, that's a huge amount of money for, they can't be very good, this organisation. And I think every time that we say that, just to be clear, perhaps, how that might...
Read it that way.
Okay.
I'm not just thinking...
Good point.
Okay.
I'm going to suggest, Louisa, since you've obviously got your pen out, that we might take advantage of that, and that you and Ruth might share that later. But we've got those points. Thank you. Tim.
Thank you. Yeah. Two things. But if I might just repeat as well. I mean, it's a good document already. So this is how can we make it even better, I guess. I wondered whether it might be useful, and I thought the stakeholder page on page 19 was terrific. You could see all that. If I was trying to put my, and I didn't have time to do it, I was trying to put my different hats on. If I was a commissioner and read it, if I was a commissioner and reading it, how would I feel? If I was a member of the public reading it, if I was a member of staff reading it, if I was a patient reading it, and it might be useful to have a sort of final proofread with those hats on to make sure that we're actually pressing all the buttons for all those stakeholders that we've got. So that's a bit like Louisa's comment, actually. So I think that would be good. And the other thing that I was looking for, and correct me if I've read it too quickly, I was looking for research. It's the ghost of Phil, I guess. and I couldn't find anything. And I think that might be an omission that we might want to think about. Did anybody else find it?
I found it referenced for certain things, yes.
Yeah.
Within this document.
But it didn't come out for me.
Thank you for those comments, Tim. Peter,
I will. I've given my comments to Chief Exec already, but I thought it was a very good document, and it was comprehensive, clear, simple, and focused on what the business was and needs to be. I thought realistic, and I thought if I may say, the foreword was good, because if you didn't read anything else, I mean, that's where I think the public stuff comes into this, because I'm not sure this document's aimed at, I don't know if it is aimed at the audience that you just mentioned, but this foreword is something the public would understand. And often these things are turgid and awful and rubbish. This is getting towards, you think, gosh, I might even read the rest of it. I might, but I might turn the page, I might not. I also just thinking of what you said about who might read this, I did feel that it committed to the current agenda that was out there, which the current government has set for us. And I think that's an important tone for this document, if I may say. So it's not political in the big sense, but it's responding to what we're being asked to do by the current government, which is relatively new, if you like, in the way that we need to write our business plans. So I think that was an important addition, perhaps, to some of the things we've done in the past. I think it's a well done document, and my colleagues are more astute than me, but I thought if we sent this out with these additions, of course, it might be even better. This would be very well received by the NHS and our commissioners.
Thank you very much, Peter. Well, I'm just going to add a couple of comments before handing over to Nick, whom I'm sure wants to say something. I would agree with the view around the table that, I've seen this document and been through it. I think the version that I saw was already well on the way to being a good plan. In particular, for example, the foreword, where I spent quite a bit of time. I mean, I was very struck by how good it was in the version that I saw, and I just tweaked it a little bit. And I'm glad you felt, Peter, that it was sort of readable and interesting. I like the words you used about the whole plan: comprehensive, clear, simple, focused, realistic. The one I would like to make two additional comments. One, I know that the team has had a difficult line to tread between being open and straightforward and transparent in our business plan, and yet recognising that we are going to be in a competitive environment, and that is difficult. And I believe that that is going to be a dilemma that is going to shape to some extent the way we hold our discussions in the future and the character of this board. And the way that it works. So I think that was reflected in this in this business plan, and some of the comments that have come up, not entirely, but some of the comments reflect the thinking that the board that the team has had to put in around that. The other comment I wanted to make relates very clearly to Peter's point, about the extent to which this plan reflects, accepts and embraces the direction of travel that the government has put us on. I think it very much does, with one significant caveat, because I think one of the things that I think this document attempts to say is that we're not sure that the current agenda really places significant enough emphasis on the role of remote and virtual and the role of self-care and supporting patients to look after themselves. And that, I think, we're in a position to make that point because we are clearly with the direction of travel of the whole of the NHS and what government wants from us. But we additionally have something to say, which I hope will be listened to. I hope. Nick, before Ruth comes back on some of those, really helpful points, I think, which will take this business plan to the next level. I know you wanted to.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to make the point that I think you've just made, which is. I think that it is undoubtedly true that as we move into a world where the future of this organisation depends entirely upon our ability to win contracts in a competitive process rather than having essentially a rollover budget with negotiations at the margins each year, the nature of the information, the analysis and the thoughts that we put into the public arena will change. This is not so that we can avoid being accountable, and this plan is very clear about what we are setting forward in terms of the use of public money and the measures that we would wish to be held to account against, and all of those things are very clear. We've set out the general direction that we're taking, but you're quite right, some of the information that's in this may not be our sharpest analysis of our competitive position in this part of the market or another part of the market, because frankly that is information that we do not wish to put in the public domain. Now that no doubt may be tested, and it's one of the dilemmas that you have going into a regulated, publicly run market, but it's nonetheless the stance that we're taking. And we will ensure that as a board we are engaged in that forward analysis and that positioning of ourselves appropriately, but not in such a way as it undermines our ability to achieve that end result for our organisation and for the NHS. So that, I'm just being fairly stark about it, and no doubt we'll get into trouble for so doing, not in this board but maybe externally, because it does challenge the notion of how some NHS organisations are expected to be run. But I'm quite clear that to be successful we can't be anything less than clear cut about that. So I just wanted to make that point forcefully, really.
Thank you, Nick. Steve.
So I sort of get that you're not going to publish details of tactics in terms of our strategy to be competitive, because I think that could be dangerous. But I think most commercial organisations do want to actually say that they are going to be competitive.
Yeah.
Yes. Because if you don't, then I think it sort of invites
I agree.
competition. Yes. So there's got to be a balance, isn't there, about something which says, by the way, we're not going to lie down. We are going to compete heavily.
Absolutely, Steve. And I think what the comments that we've heard from the board today are encouraging the team to be a bit more forceful and straightforward about we are able, and we should moreover be saying we're going to be a very tough and powerful competitor, and this is why. And I think I agree with Sue, actually. I think you were the first person to make the point, and the others feel the same, that there is more, Princess Louisa, but there is more that we can and should be saying about why we are the best competitor in this market.
I think so.
So, Ruth, I don't think it's necessary to, respond to every single comment. I'm sure, I know that you'll pick up with individuals where they have made particular points and make sure that those can be picked up. Is there anything that you'd particularly like to say to the board as a whole in relation to the comments that you've heard, which I think have been very supportive?
No, that's really helpful. I think some of the comments I'd like to pick up outside the meeting.
Yeah, please do.
Tim, your point about the R&D, I'm not sure whether you mean research underpinning what we're doing or a separate R&D plan which is in preparation to run alongside this. So I think I prefer to pick comments up outside.
Fine. So you're happy with the comments, you're going to pick up the detail outside the meeting, that sounds fine.
Yeah.
Nick, I think you want to make one specific
point about health information. Clearly there's a degree of health information included within 111, and that's referenced on page 28. In addition to that, developing other value-add additional 111 related services, we are looking very hard at the potential future market for handling additional medical, additional health information rather, including medicines, as a value add to the 111 service. So I just want to be clear that whilst we haven't come to a conclusion about that, that's the direction we're taking. It's certainly not being ignored.
Yeah. I think it's an important point to make, Nick, particularly for our health information staff. And I hope what will be clear from the tone of the of the entire plan is the importance that we place on providing medical advice and health advice and information for the public, so that they're able to make good decisions about their health and look after themselves and their families. And information is an integral part of that future, which we are hopefully underlining very clearly, as you say, Nick, as our direction of travel as an organisation.
Can I just build on that, because I think one of the things that we haven't discussed and the plan makes reference to, but not incommensurate of how important it is to us, is that we still have to provide the 0845 service for the next couple of years.
Absolutely.
Whilst we have got a clear eye on what 111 might become. And just to build on your comments about health information, then the 0845 is seen as the de facto health information and advice service nationally. So we must be very careful guardians to make sure that we don't lose that capability for the public.
Yes, I absolutely agree. Thank you. Okay, then I'm Ruth.
Joanne, sorry, I just wanted, before we move on, just to put on record my thanks to the business planning team for pulling this together. If we could just make a minute.
Yes, let's do that. And let's formally approve this draft of the business plan, subject to some changes which we've heard about and that you're going to pick up. Thank the team and commend the business plan to our stakeholders, staff, members and public. Thank you very much. Good, okay, well having said I give you a break, I'm going to change my mind.